Greetings, everyone. This is Force Nature coming at you with another chat discussion. Alright, so how's everyone doing tonight? Just let me know if everything's looking alright. Alright, in this session, we're going to be taking a look at basically a discussion between the disposition between 2D fighters and 3D fighters. What's up, Nicholas Torres? So one, thanks for joining the stream. Alright, so if you guys have any questions about anything related to today's topic, then just let me know. Alright, so basically any modern 2D fighters or any modern 3D fighters. Like yesterday we had a discussion about the disposition of a few 3D fighters I feel are kind of struggling or not necessarily doing as well as they should be doing. Namely, Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, and Virtual Fighter. Like all three of those games, after Virtual Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, all three of those games officially have had a release in, Generation 8, so playable on at least the PlayStation 4. Because prior to Virtual Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, the only Virtual Fighter release was essentially PS3 or Xbox 360 releases. But I want to try and get into the discussion also about 2D fighters, so anything. So generally, anything around, let's say, post Street Fighter 5 or around the time of Street Fighter 5. So I'll allow even stuff like Guilty Gear Xrd, which I think released before Street Fighter 5. So anything prior to that, I think, probably wouldn't really be considered modern. But yeah, like yesterday, this is still going to be a pretty much of a free discussion. So, but yeah, the first thing that I'm going to find now is, in general, just in my own experience, I find that 2D fighters seem to fare better in the fighting game community than 3D fighters. Prior to Soul Calibur 6 making an appearance at EVO 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it would have been EVO 2019. The only 3D fighter that has really been making an appearance at EVO, so at Evolution, the Evolution tournament, is, Tekken, such as Tekken 7. If I remember correctly, prior to Tekken 7, back in 2014, there was even a chance that Tekken Tag Tournament 2 may not have made an appearance there, because I remember Tekken Tag 2 didn't necessarily do that well at that tournament. I think it made it had between 250 to 260 entrants, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas Tekken 7 now has the capability to draw probably as much as even 2,000 entrants at an EVO. But yeah, I mean, I remember if it wasn't for Markman, Tekken Tag 2 wouldn't have even made it to that 2014 EVO. And if Tekken Tag Tournament 2 was not at that EVO, then there would have been no 3D fighter representation, at EVO for that year. So essentially, it feels like Tekken 7's been picking up the slack for 3D fighters. But I'll end up asking a question right now that you might be a little bit more comfortable. How do you feel Tekken, or in this case Tekken 7, compares with the other 3D fighters? Just let me know in the comments. Overall, I find that, Tekken 7 is still a 3D fighter through and through. On one hand, I do find that Tekken 7 does play differently than either Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, or Virtual Fighter. However, on the other hand, though, Tekken still feels at least somewhat similar to Dead or Alive and Virtual Fighter. I mean, I know Soul Calibur is basically kind of like its own thing, even though Soul Calibur is also a 3D fighter through and through. Tekken, like Marvel of Street Fighter, will always have their hardcore audience. For sure. I mean, Tekken's a massive legacy game. Tekken goes back until, basically the 90s. There are people that have played Tekken, I think, literally, over as much as, over 20 years. So, I mean, I can't, like I said, you're gonna be having a lot of trouble to find people that have been playing, DOA or, Soul Calibur for, 20 plus years, or Alright, well, there's also people that have played, Virtual Fighter for over 20 years later, but the amount of people that, play play those games for over 20 years are pretty like uncommon though. Although although in Tekken's case, Tekken specifically kind of blew up with Tekken 7. Like the first favorable Tekken game that I remember was Tekken 3, but I remember there was Tekken 3 then Tekken Tag 1. Yeah, Tekken Tag Tournament 1, and then Tekken 4 I remember was quite unfavorable with the Tekken community and kind of set the game back a bit. Tekken 5 was a bit more favorable, Tekken 6 was okay, and then Tekken Tag 2 again set the community back, and now with Tekken 7, Tekken's probably seen some of the highest Tekken 7's now seen some of the highest popularity that it's probably seen like ever, the highest growth and all that. But yeah, both Tekken and Street Fighter do have Tekken and Street Fighter do have really strong audiences though. Like Tekken's like I'm still almost kind of surprised how popular Tekken is how popular Tekken 7 ended up being, in the sense that the game just really like blew up. Like its first year wasn't necessarily the strongest. I remember it got pretty lukewarm reviews. It did kind of okay in its first year, even though it got like over 2 years. It got like almost 3 years worth of like promotion leading up to its eventual release. But now, if we're gonna now compare it with 2D fighters, overall I find that 2D fighters do have a bit of 2D fighters have a bit of an advantage. Like overall, I'm guessing though that 2D fighters are probably a little easier to develop. Like I'm not a developer myself, so I'm not completely certain about how it is. But with 2D fighters, I find that their development is a little simpler than 3D fighters, because with 3D fighters you have much more fully featured stages. You have larger movesets on 3D models. Even though most modern 2D fighters now use 3D models as opposed to sprites, like anything post like Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle pretty much uses 3D graphics. But I find that you're more likely to have a bit of a focus or a bias towards 2D fighters in the fighting game community. I think it's also because there's like a lot of options. The 2D fighters get a lot of representation at big events like EVO. The fact that the two of the biggest fighting games, the Street Fighter series and the Mortal Kombat series, have massive legacies behind them also helps it a lot. Whereas with 3D fighters, only Tekken really has what I would consider a really strong legacy. Like all the games have been around all the games have now been around for over 25 years, so they should have strong legacies, but they've Virtual Fighter, Soul Calibur, and DOA have all made decisions or unfortunately made moves that kind of affected its popularity growth. Like Soul Calibur was like huge with Soul Calibur 2, but it's never really been huge since. I mean, Soul Calibur 6 is one of the more better received Soul Calibur games in a while, especially after Soul Calibur 5, but I mean, even with how well Soul Calibur 6 is doing, I only feel that the community's maybe doing a bit better than how Soul Calibur 5 was. Like, I know like Soul Calibur 5 kind of suffered, and Soul Calibur 6 is definitely doing better, but I still feel that Soul Calibur 6 isn't really like a huge major thing in the community. But I mean, I personally think Soul Calibur 6 has done pretty decently for itself, though. Them being the most consistent in the fighting games. Yeah. I think only Street Fighter had the biggest gap between one game or another. I don't know. Street Fighter kind of cheats though. Even though like you said, there's big gaps between Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter 4, and Street Fighter 5. They used to have stuff like Street Fighter Alpha and stuff like that. They had multiple releases of like Street Fighter 2. I mean, all the way up to Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, also known as Super Turbo. Street Fighter 3, I think, had a couple iterations. I mean, leading into Third Strike. So. And then, of course, Street Fighter 4 had Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, and then Ultra Street Fighter 4. So, I mean, like, there's been lots of Street Fighter releases, though. Where even Street Fighter 5 has had Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 5 Arcade Edition, and Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition. It does take more work to make a 3D fighting game than a 2D. Soul Calibur is being in a strange place in Soul Calibur 3. Yes, Soul Calibur 3 is the game that has definitely kind of hurt Soul Calibur's... I guess you can say its reputation, but mostly Soul Calibur 3 hurt its momentum, though. Because that was the game that the competitive community didn't really jive that well with. And it doesn't feel like the game has really been able to recover any of that Soul Calibur 2 momentum, so... And I also feel that making Soul Calibur 3 exclusive to PlayStation 2 was really not a good move. Like, I think, though, when you had the success with Soul Calibur 2, which was on 3 platforms, you had it on the Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and on the GameCube, where it was quite favored. So releasing it only on the PS2 just really kind of limited that momentum. The game also, I think, had no guest characters. Even though Soul Calibur 3 had a lot of content, but it just did not have the hype that Soul Calibur 2 had. Yeah, but with regards to, like, moving along to other games now, I might as well move on to DOA now. I find that DOA was in its biggest spot between Dead or Alive 3 up until DOA 4, and then after DOA 4, it kind of slowly went downhill. I mean, I'm not a fan of Itagaki's kind of is non-competitive kind of mentality, because I feel that's what hurt a game like DOA 4, kind of hurt DOA in general. However, he had this kind of passion for the games, and I felt that DOA was at its best, well, for the games that were developed by Itagaki. Even though I think that Dead or Alive 5, especially with Ultimate and Last Round, are honestly, in my opinion, more favorable games, DOA 4 just had this... It just had this kind of aura to it that the other DOAs didn't really have as much. Like, Dead or Alive 3 and Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate, and even Dead or Alive 2 were all really good, though, But I think I said also in our last stream that Dead or Alive 4 is a good balance between offline offerings and online offerings. And just simply having really good appeal to casuals. Being pretty much the only fighting game you could play online on the Xbox 360 or really at all helped it also a lot for the first couple of years or so. Soul Calibur 4 was supposed to be the last one. And then Project Soul released Soul Calibur 5, and that ended up being, I think, the most unfavorable Soul Calibur game like ever, and it ended up setting back the franchise by a lot. Then they tried to make up for it with Soul Calibur Lost Souls, a single-player online, which was a really bad decision, and that just made things worse. So I guess the Soul Calibur community is counting their stars that we even bothered getting a Soul Calibur 6. DOA is another series that's being in a strange place as all. DOA's always kind of been in a strange phase, but I can actually argue that DOA's probably been in an awkward place starting from DOA 5. Like the first post-Itagaki DOA. Mainly because the game at times can feel like it has a bit of an identity crisis. Like it doesn't know if it wants to be kind of like that hardcore kind of brawler, or if it wants to be a game that appeals to, well, fans of fan service, for instance. It tries to do both, and then it leads to the old adage that if you try to please everyone, then you end up pleasing no one. There we go. 3D fighters tend to be more balanced, it seems, debated. I do prefer the balance of 3D fighters, though. I like it, though, how with 3D fighter rosters, you almost always get this feeling that any character is viable and that you can use any character. Even though there are definitely still clear tiers in 3D fighters, you always get that feeling that even that the difference between top tier and low tier is not that big. It's usually maybe S at the top and then maybe B. Whereas in 2D fighters, you end up having characters that are like straight up like unviable and stuff like that. Where like in like a Mortal Kombat game, you feel forced to have to play like a top tier character if you want to be competitive. Yeah, me too. Soul Calibur 6 and Soul Calibur 6 and Tekken 7 are pretty well balanced though. Out of all the 3D fighters, I feel that Tekken 7's is probably the least balanced, although that's a testament to just how well balanced games are. Because I feel that the different Virtual Fighter 5 iterations are very well balanced. They're arguably the most balanced of the 3D fighters. Soul Calibur 6 is pretty well balanced. Dead or Alive 6 is also pretty well balanced, even if it can seem favorable towards 9-frame jabbers. And did I miss anything? I think I said Soul Calibur. Well, you get the idea though. All the 3D fighters are all pretty well balanced though. Like it's just because of the nature of just how there's a lot of mechanics in general in these games. I don't necessarily want to say that the characters are not unique, but it's just the kind of the way how it is, where it's mostly focused around close range combat. It feels like it's easier to balance 3D fighters, whereas with 2D fighters though, especially like anime fighters, the characters could vary a lot. Like, I still remember the first time I played Blaze Blue Calamity Trigger, like, over, like, aeons ago. It's like every character was, like, their own thing. There was only 12 characters, but they were pretty much, like, their own entity, and that must have been kind of hell to be able to balance that. Tekken 7 did good before the pay-to-win. Yeah. Probably no. I'm just not wasn't really a fan of season 3 that much though. I mean, Leroy and Fakaram just are basically like memes and all that. Although to be fair, I'm not. Even though I like the idea of kind of geese speeding the game, and I guess having a character like Noctis to an extent, I felt that geese and Noctis were kind of like weird also. And then there's also oh geez, why is his name? Oh, Negan. I mean, even though Tekken 7's game design allows for kind of like quirky design like that, where with DOA and VF it's pretty much just straightforward, just physical combat. I mean, Soul Calibur being a weapon-based game, well, I would say with a lot of fantasy in it, also allows for quite a bit of variability of character design types and all that. I mean, like, having 2B in, like, Soul Calibur 6, like, just, wow. If she was in any other fighting game, she would just seem, like, incredibly awkward. Like, I can only imagine how 2B would be, like, in Tekken 7, for instance. 2D fighters... Alright, let me just make sure I'm just catching up with the chat okay. No problem. Looking at both chats too, so don't be afraid. Voice your comments if you want. I mean, if you have something that you would like to contribute. I always see different characters in tournaments. 3D fighters seem more fair if it isn't. Well, that's probably the balance thing though, because 2D fighters have more character specific tools and game plans. Yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking though, and not just anime fighters, even Street Fighter 2. I mean, with the more recent Guilty Gear Strive, each character feels very specific, and you basically have to like learn the character. Like you can't just like learn one character then just apply that fundamentals and call it a day kind of thing like that. Where you have to do that. Like even though in Guilty Gear, you have to learn the mechanics and everything. When learning a game like Virtual Fighter, it's like learn the mechanics first, and then you can like learn a character type of thing. Where in 2D fighters, you have to learn your character. You have to learn like your character kind of like inside out, while also learning the mechanics though. So that's also part of the reason, I guess, why certain games can get away with like smaller rosters. You know, 2D fighters have more characters. 3D fighters are more system based and usually have less outright fun and what? I suppose. What do you mean by outright fun and wild things? But yeah, I get what you mean though. Like I'll just use DOA and Virtual Fighter as examples. Like when someone's just watching gameplay of both of those games, it looks like a relatively straightforward fist fighting game with juggle mechanics in them. Whereas Soul Calibur finds an interesting balance, or I should more specifically say modern Soul Calibur games. Like I mean like Soul Calibur 2 actually felt like a different thing in itself. But I'll say straight up, Soul Calibur 6 feels like anime. It feels like an anime 3D fighter. I mean, it has a full-fledged meter systems that was introduced in Soul Calibur 5. You have characters like Aswol or like 2B. Soul Calibur 5 had like Viola. I mean, it's pure anime, but in like 3D forms though. It's like pretty cool. Although the pressure is not really abusive like in the way how like some 2D fighter or anime games can be like, but it still feels like a bit of a cross right there. Whereas DOA and Virtual Fighter don't really have that kind of anime feel to them as much, even if DOA has a slight anime aesthetic. As for Tekken, alright, I don't really think that Tekken feels anime, even though the game does have pretty lengthy juggle combos in it, although Tekken's always a weird game to compare, because Tekken basically kind of feels like its own thing. 2D, I see the same characters way more. Well, I guess it kind of depends on the game though, but I guess you're partially right. Probably even like KOF, which can have like KOF 14 had like 50 characters, but yeah, I mean, with games like the Tekken games have like massive rosters, and even like Dead or Alive 6 and Soul Calibur 6 have like decent sized rosters on that. Only Virtual Fighter out of the 3D fighters has like a smaller-ish roster at only 19 characters. But yeah, in 3D fighters, I think you do probably find to be slightly more variety though. Leroy and Fa. Hey Louis Barish, thank you for joining the stream. Same with Xlab and Jushido Brown. Always good to see you, Jushido. Alright, Louis Barish said, in my opinion, the mechanics on DOA are solid despite the fan service. Yes. That is actually probably a really good idea when going into DOA. You can enjoy the fan service for some visuals and all this, but the visuals only really just catch your eye maybe immediately. It's the gimmick. It's the gameplay that keeps you coming, and honestly, DOA's mechanics are solid. like I'll be fair and say some stuff can be tweaked, but overall, the game honestly is underappreciated in terms of the mechanical solidness department. Bruh, Soul Calibur is fun. Hey, T-Zoc Wave, I agree. Soul Calibur is a crap ton of fun. Soul Calibur is amazing. Alright, though, so I admit that one thing you can actually keep in mind right now is that there are 4 main 3D fighters. Any other attempts at 3D fighters, I'm going to probably say straight up, haven't really been successful. So these are Virtual Fighter, Tekken, DOA, and Soul Calibur are the ones that have kind of lasted into the modern generation. But with 2D fighters, though, I think Arc Systems themselves have more than like four different types of games themselves. The Arc System Worth has Guilty Gear. They have BlazBlue. Well, they had Persona 4 Arena, but Persona 4 Arena might as well be BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle now. They have Dragon Ball Fighters. They have Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. They had a Kill la Kill game, but that's was Arena Fighter. But you kind of get the idea, though, that it feels like there's a lot of like 2D fighter options, though, so it gets a lot of exposure and stuff like that. And that's just Arc System. I'm not even going over stuff like Skullgirls or Western fighting games like Mortal Kombat, Injustice, Killer Instinct. So I mean that it just feels like kind of weird, though. But although, with that said, what would you think about there being another 3D fighter franchise? For instance, if Team Ninja came up with their own kind of fighting game type, let's say if they came up with something unrelated to DOA, and let's say it played like a Yakuza game or something like that, like a Yakuza fighting game, or having their own weapon fighting game that played like Neo or something like that. What do you think it would be better for the 3D fighter genre to maybe have another attempt at a 3D fighter? I only noticed the fan service after DOA 5. For me, it was Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate that did it. Because after Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, of course, what was one of the big features about Dead or Alive Ultimate was having a beach stage and adding bikinis. It was like, okay, if you're going to go that route. Where Dead or Alive 2 and Dead or Alive 3 didn't really focus on the fan service at all. It was kind of subtle. Apart from, yes, I remember the She Kicks High commercial, but for Dead or Alive 2, you only really... It's one of those things where you only really notice the fan service if you either go out of your way to focus on it, or because you could have that Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore did have that little album of the chicks in bikinis, but other than that, though, the fan service didn't really attract me to DOA 2 at all. And in DOA 3, I remember I barely noticed it, though. Mainly because I was just too focused on how badass Ayane was. Loser Kashiwagi. What's up? Hey, F.O.N, made it to the stream. Welcome! Just want to say, everyone else, welcome to the stream also if you're just joining in. And a big thank you to the people that have been here from the start and watching me set up. Alright, let's get back to the questions, though. When I say fun, I mean all the wild stuff, more wild character art types, mechanics. Yeah. I would love it, though, if games like Dead or Alive and Virtual Fighter had more kind of like out there designs and stuff like that. Like Tekken and like Soul Calibur, I think has a good balance, though, of I like Soul Calibur's character designs. Tekken's okay, even though Tekken does have some silliness, like the bears, kangaroos, and stuff like that. Even though Tekken's visual design is also still fairly distinctive too, which is good. But yeah, I think out of the 3D fighters, Tekken and Soul Calibur have the better character design in terms of kind of catching your attention and like individuality to an extent. It'd be nice to have another game around just so the conversation isn't stuck to DOA Soul Calibur. Yes, prior to Virtual Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown releasing, it was basically just Tekken, Soul Calibur, then DOA. I mean, Final Showdown was like 9 years ago, so I mean, like, once we came to the next generation, Final Showdown, of course, kind of just, well, it kind of dropped off fairly quickly. Hell, Final Showdown kind of, I remember Final Showdown even struggled after it kind of released, though, because it was still just Virtual Fighter 5. But yeah, you get the idea, though, that it just, if you're not into DOA, if you're not into Soul Calibur, or if you're not into Tekken, it's like, then what do you go with if you want to go with 3D fighters? What do you play? UFC 4? Which I will admit I actually do kind of enjoy that game, but that's sport fighting. DOA fan service gets me hard, though. TCC, a man of culture. I see we got in here. Although I'm pretty sure everyone here is a man of culture, but like still, the fan service gets you in. The gameplay keeps you in. That choke in the chicken commercial deal is fun. Oh, jeez. Ah, guys. Don't make me remember that. Add in Mary Ross. Mary Rose was, I mean... you type it on your phone, you get Mary Ross. Oh, that sounds like some sort of like agent character or something. And Hanukkah was really fan service, so... Yeah, pretty much. Although Mary Rose and Hanukkah, I don't know... Would you consider it unadulterated fan service, or was it, or were they added for the sake of trying to bring in a new type of, or trying to attract a new type of audience, the audience that likes lolis? I mean, creating Hanukkah is cancer. Wait, which DOA commercial is that? I actually prefer DOA designs to Tekken's. I think Tina and Neo are great characters, well designed. Oh yeah, Tina and Neo Tengu are both fantastic. Neo Tengu's design is. She might have, after Ayane, yes, I'm biased, I think Neo Tengu might arguably have maybe one of the best female character designs, definitely out of DOA and in general. I guess it's also kind of a plus that Dead or Alive 6 also looks downright gorgeous. I mean, Team Ninja has done an absolutely bang-up, fantastic job with their character models. Both in, basically every DOA, but both in Dead or Alive 5, Dead or Alive 5 Last Round, Dead or Alive 6, in all the iterations, the character models look gorgeous. They look amazing. And I'm not just talking about necessarily pleasing aesthetics, but I mean, it's just good graphics, good visual design. It's great. With that said, though, I mean, like, you could still have some kind of, like, crazier, out there characters, though. I mean, like I like characters like Phase 4 or, like, Raidu, stuff like that's just really unique. And maybe an Alpha 152 that was balanced better, but yeah, you get the idea, though. At times, it can kind of feel like DOA's, like, characters... I wouldn't necessarily want to say they seem generic, but they lean towards the side of just trying to be like a waifu or anything like that. I think I was for the PSP DOA. What was that? Dead or Alive Paradise? It was really sad that came out like over, 5 years after Dead or Alive 4. And this was the next Dead or Alive game after Extreme 2. Another Extreme game. Exactly, brother. Fellow culture... Yeah, I'm on the phone. No problem, Fane James. I will let you know, actually, the videos actually probably look better on the phone just because it's smaller screen, so you get that pixel density, so no problem. Japan basically is why they were added. Pretty much. Like I said, the Asian markets eat this stuff up. They love this type of stuff. And I'm pretty sure there's also people in the Western markets that like this stuff too. So, I mean, like I said, it's just a couple popular tropes. It's the same reason why Nico was made a loli. That type of stuff is popular, so that's the route they went. I don't know if... I would say, though, that... I don't know if I really consider that part of DOA's identity. Because I personally felt like the addition of Mary Rose, Hanukkah, and Nico ended up... I felt that it ended up kind of changing DOA's identity a bit, though. But it kind of gets back to my point. I don't know if I made it this stream or last stream. That from Dead or Alive 5 onwards, DOA feels like it has like a mild identity crisis, which I think has hurt it a bit compared to DOA 2 through 4. It's just hard in general to make a new fighting game IP if it's not based on existing popularity. There hasn't been a new fighting game since Under Night. Was that after... Oh, yeah, that was after... Skullgirls, right? Under Night was 2014, I think. But yeah, I'll just stick with 3D fighters just for this immediate point, just because I'm more familiar with. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that basically Virtual Fighter, Tekken, DOA, Soul Calibur, these are the games that, again, they all started in the 90s, and they're the only ones that have survived the test of time up into like the current generation. Where any other attempts at 3D fighters, including turning like a 2D fighter into a 3D fighter, hasn't really been successful. And some developers, namely usually Bandai Namco, have gone the route of like arena fighters, and those are usually not as favored also, aside from, well, their casual appeal and all that. But yeah, I mean, I actually do full-heartedly admit that the odds of getting a new 3D fighter is quite low. Like, I'm pretty sure it's no surprise that that Killer Instinct decided to go This Killer Instinct decided to be a 2D fighter, despite the fact that Killer Instinct Gold actually had some kind of 3D elements to its design. Like, it played on a 2D plane, but it kind of had this feeling of being in like a 3D environment where the screen kind of turned with you at corners and stuff like that, even though it still played like a 2D fighter. And then with the Killer Instinct reboot, they just went straight up 2D. Mortal Kombat tried going 3D, and it, quite frankly, was not really that successful. They went back to 2D with Mortal Kombat 9 in 2011, and then they've been successful ever since. And that was when... Also, no for Love for Blood. Oh, don't worry. Anyone with a PS1 definitely remembers Bloody Roar. And you're right, for a 3D fighter that people would like to have an attempt at making a return, Bloody Roar definitely would be at the top of the list. But yeah, I was just talking about the 4 3D fighters that have kind of endured the test of time, if you want to call it that. Where I admit I don't really know why, like Bloody Roar, they stopped giving it a chance, but I admit that from the PlayStation 2 era, like the Generation 6, I felt that fighting games in general had kind of gone downhill a little bit. They ran into a bit of a slump around that generation. I'm all about the husbandos. Don't got time to waste. Sorry about Well, good news, Jacob Bowser. Fighting games like DOA and Soul Calibur have tons of husbandos. But one big husbando is missing. His name is Ein. And no, I'm not talking about Hayate. He's not Ein. Remember when fighting EX Lair was almost a... Well, I guess you mean 3D fighter? I don't remember the history of that. I don't remember the history of fighting EX Lair that much, though. Yeah, I would have to be filled in that, but I know all I've known about fighting EX Lair was it being a 2D fighter. Talking about other 3D games, would you consider Dark Souls player versus player 3D fighter? No, it's a really terrible, sadistic, sad joke. Well, all right. Well, I guess you can call it. You can call it an arena fighter if the arena fighter's purpose was just to grieve the opposing player. And also because of the fact that Dark Souls is an RPG, so it's also stat based. FEXL had sidestepping in the first trailer. It was a regular 2 fighter when the beta dropped. Okay, thanks for that though. But I guess the developer though. I mean, it's just a 2D fighter is just kind of easier to put together, and also it's a more popular genre, so it feels almost more brain dead to wanna, or I should say, it's like a no-brainer to just choose to go 2D. Like, isn't there supposed to be a 2D fighter by the League of Legends developer Riot? So, I mean, another Western-developed fighting game that kind of looked like, from what I saw, like Rolling Thunder, but with League of Legends characters. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's no surprise that they were choosing to go down the route of it making like a 2D fighter. Like, honestly, there's just usually not that much with regards to 3D fighters, though, unless you count something like UFC 4. Yeah. Damn, I forgot FEXL even came out. Yes, there is a Riot Fire coming. Yes, Riot is supposed to be a fighting game. Look for... Oh, yeah. Project L. I definitely remember it. I've seen it. From what I saw, it looked like Rolling Thunder, though. That PC fighting game beta thingy that unfortunately didn't come to fruition. FEXL had like no marketing. Pretty much. Unfortunately, a lot of niche 2D fighters don't really have that much marketing, though. I mean, like Guilty Gear Strive would probably be one of the bigger kind of niche anime fighter type games, though. But like FEXL has like no marketing, though. Pretty sure games like Fantasy Strike I don't remember having a lot. I don't know how much marketing like Skullgirls get. Even fully priced games like Samurai Showdown didn't really get that much marketing. Although I meant Samurai Showdown is not an indie game or anything like that. Don't mind me just checking on both chats. Yatagarasu flopped 2. Samurai Shodown did do good on most things that weren't netcode. Yes, Samurai Showdown is a pretty solid though. I mean, like, I thought it was a nice step up in terms of, I guess, at least visual quality and appeal than KOF 14 is. Although Samurai Showdown at times can kind of feel like a 2005 game that released in 2019 with online capability, because it does feel like it's developed based on older design principles, I guess, including having a cheap ass boss as the final boss, because SNK games like having that. Although I know I'm talking about the story mode, but you kind of get the idea though. Where Samurai Showdown doesn't necessarily really feel that modern. I mean, it looks great in a match though, and also the mechanics of course are more modernized, so it doesn't. The gameplay doesn't feel dated, but the overall design, I admit at times, can feel a little dated though. At least visually it looks pretty good though. I mean, especially again if you can play it on Xbox One X or better that has like 4K capability. They brought demos to events, active on Twitter, free season pass for pre-orders. Samurai Showdown went 3D 4 times. Yeah, 2 titles were great. Two titles were great. One was terrible, and the other put the series on ice for a decade. Something about that is really making me familiar. I don't know if I was thinking of KOF Maximum Impact. Cause I admit I don't really remember the 3D Samurai Showdown, because the first thing that came to mind was the KOF Maximum Impact game, and those 3D fighters were not very favorable. I think 2D fighters more easily allow that anime fight feel. Not to say 3D can't bring up the same feel, but it seemed more difficult. Also, 3D archetypes seem less straightforward comparatively. I will full-heartedly agree with that. Could you imagine if Dragon Ball FighterZ was a 3D fighter? Actually, what am I talking about? It's always a 3D fighter. All those arena fighters. But it's weird though. As soon as Dragon Ball FighterZ goes 2D, it ends up being much more favorable. But I think the thing about 2D fighters having that anime feel, because it's weird though. Like Soul Calibur still has a bit of an anime feel to it, but I think it's because 2D fighters don't feel ashamed to have that kind of just bonkers craziness. Like, you know how DOA tends to get accused or tends to get ridiculed for fan service and all that, and like any random anime fighter at least has some degree of fan service to it. I mean, like it's a Japanese thing. They like their titties. I mean, so it's like. So that's why I feel it's kind of weird sometimes when DOA gets accused of that. But like I'm saying though, like I said, 2D fighters are not afraid to just be off the wall crazy. That's why watching like a Marvel vs. Capcom 3 fight it's just like flashing lights and it's just crazy on the screen. Where a 3D fighter fight always feels at least somewhat grounded in reality. Even a Soul Calibur fight feels at least somewhat grounded in reality. Like some people even say that watching a Virtual Fighter fight looks like a real fight, even though juggles aren't realistic, but so I guess some people are saying that's the closest thing to like a normal fight. Like that. FEXL come out around the time of Soul Calibur 6, DB Fighters, and Smash Ultimate. Also, I also forgot to say welcome to the chat, Gabriel Cavarjo, Vieira Santos, and Anten Nevieros. I apologize if I butchered those names. Not good with kind of Spanish or Portuguese sounding names, but thanks for joining the chat. Yes, Ein and Hayate, 2 different characters. The 2 great 3D Samurai Shodown were sadly only released on the Neo Geo system. Makes total sense why I unfortunately wouldn't have heard of them. 3D fighters are way more grounded and simplistic. 2D fighters, you can get anything. People will tell us slow down and fly. I'm not sure if calling 3D fighters simplistic is the right word. What I said though is that, like I said, they're more grounded in IRL, so in real life kind of I don't know, fight feel, if you want to call it. There's the fights are still very fantastical or something like that and fantasy, but a 2D fighter fight doesn't feel like a real fight at all. Like, they're more likely to go crazy, and I would like it though maybe if you had a 3D fighter that would go crazy. Like, I don't know, I was thinking of a game. What was it? It was Fate Stay Night game on the PS2, although I think if I remember correctly that was a 2D game with 3D graphics, so but trying to remember if that was a 3D game. It was called Fate Stay Night, so based on that series. But I don't remember that was a 3D fighter though. But continuing on, this is a good point though. It's quite the opposite though. I feel that the thing about 3D fighters is I feel that 3D fighters are actually really complex in terms of overall design. But because they're grounded, they create the impression that they're more simple. Where 2D fighters kind of need that off-the-wall craziness in order for them to not be boring. Because if 2D fighters weren't crazy, then you just get, footsies. The game. Which also has rollback netcode. I might let you guys know. Yeah. Oh, need some water now. Mouse dry. It would say that the 2D ones can go over the top more often. Yep, I agree. Even in something as boring as Street Fighter, you have people tossing fireballs, stealing others people's. Yep, yeah. That actually brings up an interesting question, and I might say this now. And this is a completely neutral question. Do you guys find Street Fighter boring to watch? I think it was a 2D fighter. Yeah, simplistic was the wrong word there. They're just not as flashy and all. Yeah. I agree though, and that's the general thing though. 3D fighters have their flash, but they pale in comparison to the flashiness of like an anime fighter, for instance. Mr. Annoying you badly. Yes, extremely annoying. All right, there's one response. Yes, but I'm not a Street Fighter person. Zeku's cool though. Oh, you like Zeko? I do like to watch Street Fighter. Okay. I wouldn't say 3D is simpler. Combo execution may be a little easier in some. I think neutral is way more complex in 3D. Yes. Simply add in a third dimension, basically sidestepping and sidewalking, adds a lot more depth to the core neutral. But I think it was more emphasized in 3D. Street Fighter 5 is boring to watch, by that comparing it to other. Street Fighter is boring as hell to watch. I don't watch them anymore. I'm more of a 2D and I like watching Street Fighter 5. Okay. Street Fighter can be fun to watch. I wouldn't say it's boring. I do think it's more boring in DOA though. Okay. Depending on the matchup, Street Fighter is either exciting or boring for me. All right. Thank you for the responses, guys. Hello there. Hey, what's up, no one or someone? Hello there. I haven't seen Street Fighter 5 gameplay, so I can't tell. Oh, just look up any Capcom Tour gameplay or anything like that. I like to watch and I like to play and watch Tekken 7 as well. Oh yeah, Tekken 7. Tekken 7 is a pretty dope game, though. I mean, it has a good balance between overall depth in gameplay and mechanics, and I admit that competitive Tekken is pretty fun to watch. Akuma Fighter 5. As for Street Fighter, I know when you think of Street Fighter, you think of Street Fighter 5. In general, I like watching like high level competitive like playing Street Fighter. Although I know if the gameplay is not exactly like high level competitive, then yeah, it's not really that fun. Another thing is because I find that the actual base of 2D fighters is simpler, you can understand the footsies a lot more easily. Like footsies in 3D fighters is a lot harder to understand. In Tekken, it's probably the easiest because in Tekken, there's a lot of dancing around. So when someone gets blown the hell up, and there's even a loud sound and a big counter hit sound or combos starting sound or whatever in Tekken. So as a result, Tekken makes the neutral game easier to understand. But in like Soul Calibur, DOA, or Virtual Fighter, the neutral is incredibly hard to understand if you don't understand the games. There's lots of times people watch either DOA and Soul Calibur and they're like, what the hell's going on? Like, I don't understand what's going on. In Tekken's like, okay, someone got launched. Now they're losing half their health. But with Street Fighter, though, it's like the same thing. You have the footsies, so it's either zoning, poking, or basically fishing for a combo opportunity of some sort. Zoner versus zoner is boring. Yeah, I admit that is actually probably the worst. That is the that is one of the, I wouldn't say the weakest, but that's the least one of the less favorable aspects of 2D fighters is like zoner. That's the reason I think why Injustice 2 was not as favorable competitively, because Injustice 2 was very zoner biased, so it's, yeah, no one really likes a zoner game because, yeah, it's just, I mean, people want to see different types of buttons. Laura is nice to play at. Did you play Laura back in season 1 though? I mean, like, she was this like the mix up type character. I mean, part striker, part grappler. If you watch some high level KF, you can see how boring Street Fighter is. Sure, yeah, pretty much though. You're talking about KOF 13, right? Admittedly, I don't know if I saw as much KOF 14, because my offline scene didn't really like KOF 14 as much. But with KOF 13 is a lot faster. Like the footsies, like the people just like blitz across the room, and KOF is also very like can be very short hop happy. So it's just that it just feels like in a KOF match, I guess it's a lot. It feels more action packed than like a Street Fighter match in comparison. I would agree with that though. I apologize if I missed anyone's comments though, but just trying to get the gist of things. Third Strike was entertaining to watch. Yeah, because Third Strike was probably the most anime that Street Fighter was. It also was, of course, the most technical. Third Strike was also the most technical Street Fighter, and it also, of course, had parries. So I mean, unfortunately, though, Third Strike was not as popular as like Street Fighter 4 was. But, All right, but to be Huang and Grow, there can be counterproof of 3D fighters being unable to do crazy. Yeah, to be Huang and Grow. Grow is basically just a physical embodiment of anime in Soul Calibur. He basically takes over Zwei as the kind of emo-y anime-like character. But again, the one fighting game I don't watch that much is Tekken. All right, fair enough. Jason Axel said something similar some years back. Okay. Oh yeah, was you talking about Third Strike, right? Some years. 13 is amazing. Yeah. KOF 13, yeah, was basically one of the more favorable ones in a while though. Some people in my scene also played KOF 2002, but yeah, they tend to like to 13 though. But for 14 though, they just almost kind of unanimously hated the game. So I admit that I'm pretty sure they'll play KOF 15 though, but we'll see if SNK learned their lessons with that. Too bad you not on PSN. I'd gladly take your 2B on. No problem, dude. I admit I'm not really an online guy, especially if a game doesn't have rollback though. But if we ever have a chance to ever play offline, I'd gladly use 2B against your Harmaru. All right, so just check the time. Okay. KF 2002 is the most played here in Brazil. Yeah, that's a pretty fair. Thought that name looked Portuguese. All right, so moving along now. What do you think of the current disposition of 2D fighters post Street Fighter 5? Like, what are your thoughts on the genre like since then? So Street Fighter 5 is around 2016. You can also mention games like around that time also. Like again, I'll include like Xrd also. Yeah. All right. I'll spice up the question a little bit. What are people's thoughts on BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, Dragon Ball Fighters, and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus? And hell, I'll throw in Guilty Gear Strive in there also. Because you'll probably notice some similarities with those games, aside from the fact that, of course, they're all like anime games. No, that only people who play 3D fighting games can understand what is going on in it. Whereas in a 2D games, you don't need to because there's hype on the screen. Partially. I will say straight up that when I don't understand a 2D fighter, I basically have no idea what the hell is going on. And the thing that goes through my mind is like, why are people being hyped? Whereas with 3D fighters, I see the opposite though. Whereas with Virtual Fighter or DOA, people don't understand what's going on, and then people don't really get as people are not likely to get as hype. Whereas with 2D fighters though, it's like as soon as someone gets blown up, everyone gets hype, and I'm like, what's going on? If I don't know the game, I'm like, what's going on? Because it's weird though. I personally don't find 2D fighters that intuitive. I mean, I don't find it that intuitive in the sense of if I didn't actually already know about 2D fighters, I wouldn't really understand what's going on. I mean, obviously, right now I have at least some experience with 2D fighters, so I can kind of understand what's going on. But before I tried any 2D fighters, apart from when I was like playing like Street Fighter 2 casually or something like that, I had like no idea what the hell is going on in a 2D fighter. Whereas 3D fighters, I tend to understand them a lot better. I think the genre has a more consumer-friendly future, especially if rollback becomes the standard post-COVID. I do admit that Strive has me a bit bored of new fighting games. Yeah. Street Fighter has been around since '87. You don't have to worry about it going anywhere. Well, for the sake of arguments, Street Fighter really started with 1991 Street Fighter 2. Because before that, it wasn't even, I don't know if it was even really a fighting game. It was mostly it was like a one-on-one type arcade game or something like that. Not like Final Fight, but it was basically you either played Ken and Ryu, and that was it. But yeah, with regards to fighting games, on one hand I can see it being consumer friendly on paper, but the thing is that Guilty Gear Strive has rollback, but how is the game doing compared to how like the Xrd games were doing? Is it doing like a whole lot better than it? Like it says, at times it feels like rollback with playing Strive and its rollback, it feels like this should have been the standard. It shouldn't have been It shouldn't be a feature that should be celebrated though. It's kind of like it's about damn fine you had rollback. Killer Instincts had rollback since 2013. It's like, okay. But the main reason why I'm bringing this up though is that when you play any other popular game online, again I'm gonna just start name dropping. Overwatch, Apex Legends, Fortnite, Call of Duty. What do those games all have? They have rollback. When people play them, they don't think about the netcode or anything because rollback netcode is basically it's a standard. It's just accepted. So Guilty Gear having rollback it sounds cool for the fighting game community, but for anyone else not in the fighting game, it's like, you mean like the online's not always like this? And then they go and play something like Samurai Showdown, and then it feels like you're playing underwater. Yeah. In 2D fighters, the visual clarity varies wildly. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus or Street Fighter V are a lot easier to follow than Marvel. Yeah, the Marvel vs. Capcom games just look like freaking light shows to me, though. I mean, people get like really hype on it, and then on one hand, it's a very exciting light show, but it still just looks like a light show to me. Aside from Strive, I feel like they have all lost their steam. One can argue that it was because they were oversimplified. Yes, starting with Dragon Ball Fighters. That's when I noticed the arc system works. Just went like, screw it. We're just gonna tone down and simplify all our games. So Dragon Ball Fighters is simplified compared to Guilty Gear or BlazBlue. BB Tag is simplified compared to Central Fiction. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is arguably probably is the easiest anime fighter to play. And Guilty Gear Strive, of course, is toned down from the other the previous versions of Guilty Gear Xrd. I said this last stream, but Capcom got away with selling 3 bad launch fighting games back to back. They're not going. Yeah, I mean, Street Fighter needs to shit the bed really badly to I guess to outright fail. Considering how long Street Fighter V is going, I mean, like, and in Street Fighter V, of course, is still being supported and all that. It shows that Capcom needs to screw up even harder than that in order to kind of fail in the way like how Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite failed, for instance. With that said, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite failed pretty spectacularly now that I think about it. Yeah, the strive rollback should be the standard. Yeah, yeah. On one hand, it's cool, but once you get used to the rollback, it's kind of cool. You realize that you're still just playing a more simplified Guilty Gear. I mean, it's a solid game in itself, though, but I don't think it's going to necessarily do that much to kind of bring people into the fighting game genre, if that makes any sense. Sales-wise, GG Strive is doing fine with over 500 copies sold. So yeah, it did start out well. It does benefit from basically having very minimal competition this year. Like, the only other notable fighting game to release, I think, was Virtua Fighter Ultimate Showdown, and that was basically like a free PlayStation Plus game, so it's like... Yeah, Guilty Gear Strive is, doing it at 500,000, but we'll see how it maintains that momentum, though. Arxis is very much in make someone's first fighting game mode and not make someone's favorite fighting game mode. That is a very interesting... basically way of looking at it, Jusila Brown. Yeah. That's exactly the kind of vibe I get from Mori, the director of the BlazBlue games. He basically wants BB Tag to be played by anyone. So that's why people sometimes call it Baby Tag or like Baby's first fighting game. That's the vibe I get from BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. That's also the vibe I get from Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Like, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is intended to be enjoyable by people who don't play fighting games, including, well, of course, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, or Grand Blue Fantasy fans, and of course to also be enjoyed by anime fans, or to be enjoyed by veteran fighting game fans. I actually don't mind the toning down of games, even though I don't necessarily want them to go too overboard with toning down to the point that someone that's not like a legacy veteran of the game is beating up someone who's a legacy veteran of the game. I mean, stuff like that. But I feel that with the direction that Arxis is going is kind of interesting. But I admit the further they go down this route, the more that it alienates veteran fighting game players. Might be because I play on PC with some niche hardware, but some more quality of life would be welcome too. You have to cut them a little bit of slack in a sense that Japanese developers haven't really been on the PC platform like as long as like Western developers have, though. So like I still remember how mediocre the Dead or Alive 5 last round Steam port was, but it feels like Japanese developers are still feel at least somewhat new to the PC platform, though. Like, I remember even 2B's game Nier Automata was pretty buggy on Steam, though. So I mean, like, that's just an unfortunate thing. They'll get better with time, though. With that said, with regards to that kind of notion that I know I just put forth right there. I know I tend to kind of maintain a mentality of that the more that we give to Japanese fighting game developers passes for stuff that should be the standard, the more that they kind of keep doing it or get away with it, though. So just one thing to keep in mind, though. So that's why I'm really glad that since the pandemic started that the fighting game community has done a good job of trying to really put Japanese fighting game developers on blast for still using delay-based netcode. I was really disappointed when I discovered that, of course, that Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown both use delay-based netcode when rollback has been around for over a decade. Like, I mean, for a 2020 onwards game, it's just simply not acceptable. It's below the standard. You're like, one way to grow, of course, is to number one, you have to develop at the standard, and then you need to kind of, I guess, move and try and achieve above that. Because, of course, people are not going to want to stick around with something that is below standard. Or below the standard. I mean, people will just move on. That was dumb in my opinion. Might be because I play... Off topic, at least is not like Riot Games removing ultra-wide support from their shooter claiming competitive integrity. I've watched some League of Legends stuff and that, but I've never played the game, though. Although I admit, though, that I'm not like a massive PC master race kind of guy, though. I do technically have a couple gaming PCs, but I'm not. I've always been kind of just like a console-centric kind of guy, though. I just love the simplicity of it, than instead of using like playing on gaming PC. Like, I admit that I mostly just use my PCs just for producing content mostly, but yeah, I unfortunately haven't really tried Riot's games that much, though. Making a game simple is not bad. but there is a point. There is a point that is too much. Yeah, yeah. I don't want the developers necessarily to go too like overboard with it. To be fair, BB Tag said that was the goal, and it's not the successor to Central Fiction Normal Blaze. But ArcSys is banking really hard on getting new audiences. Yes. It's weird though. Like, yeah, I mean, same with like Guilty Gear Strive, and I can tell that they put a decent amount of effort into the game. And with BB Tag, they're definitely trying hard to try and go beyond being like super niche, kind of like a French bred game, like Under Night, which is about as niche as you can get. I mean, ArcSys did really well for themselves with Dragon Ball Fighters. I mean, this right here is basically probably positively ArcSys' most successful game right here. Like this has like just done really well for both them and Bandai Namco. Where none of their other games I think do as well as like Dragon Ball Fighters did. It's kind of interesting also that yes, I do remember Mori saying or implying that he considers BB Tag to be its own franchise. He considers BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle to be its own entity. Although at this point though, most people, especially considering that Central Fiction turns 5 years old this year, unfortunately, BB Tag basically, as far as I'm concerned, BB Tag basically is BlazBlue right now. That's what people like think of because due to number one the name and the fact that BB Tag is being supported better than it, Central Fiction is just seen as like super niche now, where BB Tag is seen as like the main BlazBlue game. For people that didn't play GG before, Strive is probably. No, I will admit, though, that out of the Guilty Gear games, Guilty Gear Strive is hands down probably the easiest one to get into. It's still Guilty Gear, so if you haven't played a Guilty game before, it's still going to be complex. Like, the tutorial still has a lot of stuff you have to go over. But in terms of just playing the game in general, though, it's probably closer to playing, like Grand Blue Fantasy versus with air dashing. Like I said, you can definitely tell it's simplified, but it's... I don't know if I'd say it's too simple. Like, I'd say though, the game still has its complexities to it though. But I definitely admit that I don't know if I would go further than Guilty Gear Strive in terms of toning down anime fighters. At least now, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus director understood that a new fighting game must have. Yeah, although I'm not sure how much better Grand Blue Fantasy Versus would have done even with rollback though. That game was really not well promoted though. I mean, if you have to go out of your way to try and find the game or something, it's not well promoted. Like, if I remember correctly, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus didn't sell very well in the West either. Grand Blue Fantasy is an IP mainly just for like Japan or Asia, so it's like I don't know how much of a Grand Blue market there is in the West. So I mean, like, it just felt like they were just releasing the game here and hoping, kind of like Sega with Virtua Fighter Ultimate Showdown. They're just releasing the game here and just hoping that people really like it. Oh wow, did it choose this stage 3 times in a row? Oh. VF is also kind of worse since it being on relays means that if you aren't near one, you can't net play people. Yes, definitely. I mean, and that's pretty much exactly why. And I stated also yesterday that Virtual Fighter Ultimate Showdown is pretty much a physical representation of the limitations of delay-based netcode. If you're within a short distance of someone, so in the same region and everything, and you're both close to a relay, like let's say you're in a city like, I don't know, like Toronto or New York, then you'll have a great time. It will feel like offline. You can have like a proper training session. If you play anything else, any other kind of connection ranked, it feels like crap. It feels unplayable, and then it's like it doesn't feel like you're able to translate what you kind of learned in the lab. It makes it kind of feel even worse because the fact that while you're waiting for a match to queue in ranked, you are literally training in the lab where you know what your timing of moves are, and then you play a match in ranked, and then none of the timings are right. And yeah, it feels bad. Ty's like, wait, you got a Series X? Yes, I do. That's what the gameplay is being featured on right now. This is an Xbox Series X. It's an amazing console. Also, ArcSys also have doing crossovers with other companies for a while. Well, ArcSys, of course, has Dragon Ball Fighters. They have a Kill la Kill Arena Fighter. Technically, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle is a crossover with Under Night and Persona 4 Arena, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, Ruby. And let's see if they've done a. But yeah, I mean, especially with the success of Dragon Ball Fighters, I wouldn't be surprised if Arxis tries more similar types of well, licensed content. No Western Grand Blue release, and Grand Blue versus will not sell well. Pretty much, like the actual Grand Blue Fantasy game is basically just in Asia. Like for starters, it's not on like the Play Store or on Android. So I mean, like you have to look up like a specific server and able to play it though. So it's just the kind of wraparound that you have to do in order to play Grand Blue Fantasy is just. It's basically just not viable for it's just not viable to be a successful game though. I mean, it was basically just releasing and hoping. Strive, in my opinion, is like a weird fusion of a 3D fighter and a BB tag. It has a 3D fighter's damage and similar reward off buttons, and like BB tag, its depth lies in the meters. Strive has RC antagonist. I don't know if I'd really. I'm not sure if I would say it goes quite that far. I'd say straight up that. I'd say that Strive is still an anime fighter. It's probably maybe, I don't know, closer to... I don't know. It's like Mortal Kombat if Mortal Kombat had shorter combos and air dashing. In the sense of basically a 3D fighter on a 2D plane kind of deal. But that was the big focus of Guilty Gear, is shorter combos even though it does similar damage output. Mainly because they didn't want the players to get too hung up on the combos, I guess. Kind of like what Samurai Showdown does. But for Guilty Gear, they want it to be, I guess, less typical like anime. Because when people think of animes, they think of like long, oppressive combos. Strive didn't want that. Like Daisuke didn't want that with Guilty Gear. RC and Tag as assist. They got the Dungeon Fighter Online game in coming too. Oh, okay. And had Persona Sengeku Basar with Capcom back in the day. Oh, that one too. The mobile Grand Blue store game is not on Android App Store, and yet they translate the game fully in English. Yeah, I mean, having to do some sort of wraparound on an internet site in order to find Grand Blue Fantasy versus to play it was really just not. I mean, having a design and not having it on the Play Store, it's like it doesn't really let the game be conducive for success compared to something like Fate Grand Order or like Genshin Impact. But yeah, I mean that's just unfortunate though. I would love it if Grand Blue would get like a proper chance in the West though, because I personally think Grand Blue is a beautiful series though, but. The fighting game and its marketing and its overall handling just didn't do the game enough justice. Strive still has long combos; they're just juggles instead of air combos now. Yeah, I think. I mean, the toning down of that in the Strive compared to Exert, I thought. I mean, it was a decent move, and then I don't disagree with it though. So I mean, like, I do admit that I need to. I only kind of just looked at Guilty Gear Strive, just like kind of like casually now. But I would definitely in the future I would consider maybe looking into that game a bit deeper though, because again, I mean, going forward, I do kind of want to show a bit more support to rollback games. But it is nice though that I had to get some kind of opinions on Strive, since that basically is the 2D fighter of 2021 though. But and that game is also going to probably also determine the kind of direction that Arxis would move in. But right now, so we kind of have an idea of where Arxis is at. So what do you guys think of Capcom? What do people think of Street Fighter V? It's like... What did people think of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? So, I mean, like... What does Capcom do next? With regards to Marvel, I think that Capcom might have to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to have to say straight up, they're probably going to have to make a Marvel vs. Capcom 3 clone, but with newer graphics. After what happened to Infinite, the stuff they did there, they can't do that. But another thing also is what licenses will Capcom get to work with, though? Because that was a huge thing that hurt Infinite, was not having all the same characters that you could have in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. In Infinite, though, like a lot of the roster was like neutered. So they would have to try and have something more similar to like Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Capcom needs to let the other companies use Zeku. My opinion of Capcom game. Very funny. As for Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter. For a Street Fighter 6, they actually can move in a similar direction as Street Fighter 5. I don't think they're ever going to go back to one-frame links like in Street Fighter 4. A big focus with Street Fighter is, number one, making sure that your launch package is actually respectable. The way how Street Fighter 5 state was back in 2016 was quite frankly unacceptable. So, of course, this is going to seem weird, especially considering to like the focus of this channel. I would like Street Fighter to go back to focusing on having good content to appeal to casuals. As for the gameplay, maybe allow for a bit more creativity in terms of how you go about your gameplay, like your offense and stuff like that. Where I admit that, I guess, early on, like Street Fighter 5, it felt like the game kind of discouraged creativity compared to like Street Fighter 4. Same with like a future DOA 7. I want it to be more akin to, like, let's say a more solid version of like Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. Whereas Dead or Alive 6 did kind of discourage creativity with combos. Since Dead or Alive 6 just wanted you just to do whatever was the optimal bound into close hit stuff majority of the time, so... Hello, Kevin Ray Rays. Hi, since you are a very experienced fighting game player, I had a question for you. Which one of the following games is more beginner-friendly or better to start in the genre? Dead or Alive 5 or so? No Dead or Alive 6? Technically, Dead or Alive 6 is beginner-friendly. But between a Dead or Alive game and Soul Calibur 6, I'm actually going to say straight up, Dead or Alive is easier to get into. However, overall, Soul Calibur 6 might be a little easier to play once you get up to higher levels. Because a big thing about Soul Calibur 6 is just understanding what the systems are. Like, a big thing... What the hell just happened? Because a big thing with Soul Calibur 6 is that there's just a lot of like little systems that you have to kind of like understand how to work. But Dead or Alive also has quite a bunch of systems, and both games don't make you sweat the execution. But I find that DOA's meta has a bit more to it due to the stun system and stuff like that. However, in terms of just pick up and play, I think DOA is better for pick up and play. Although in both games you can just mash buttons at a low level and have yourself a blast, but Soul Calibur has like a bunch of has a bunch of like little systems that are just going to be like kind of awkward to understand with it. Not to mention getting your ass kicked in Soul Calibur at a low level is going to be incredibly frustrating for you. And you're just going to hate certain characters' guts. I'm not going to name who, but you'll know it. Certain Whip Queen and guy with a giant sword. Take a break and rebrand. Capcom versus with no other IPs can help. Yeah. Capcom might have to kind of rebrand or reboot its like Versus series for a modern generation, though. Like, what was their last Versus game? Infinite, and that basically set Marvel back like half a decade or however many years it set Marvel back. Oh, now that I think about it, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 turned 10 years old this year. Wow. Or Tekken 7. If you're new to the 3D fighter genre, I would not recommend Tekken 7. If you are new to Tekken, then yes. Hands down, Tekken 7 would be the best game if you want to learn Tekken. However, Tekken is an incredibly unfriendly game for newcomers, unless you want to be cheat with law at a low level, compared to DOA and Soul Calibur. A big reason is because, similar to like 2D fighters, Tekken 7 has this kind of what I call an upfront payment system, in the sense that your skill needs to be at this level before you can kind of like start to enjoy the game. Namely, I'm talking about the movement system in Tekken. The Korean backdash system is really going to be a bit more challenging for you than Soul Calibur's 8-way run or DOA's free step-in system. Not to mention in Tekken 7, though, if you make any mistakes, then the opponents can easily punish you for like 40% of your health and stuff like that. Like Tekken Tekken 7 can be pretty frustrating when you're learning it, though. I'm surprised you didn't mention Virtual Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5, for good or worse, showed that games can improve a lot if they keep being worked on. Now, Infinity had good ideas, but bad execution. What's Infinity? Oh, yeah, I mean, Street Fighter 5 is a lot more favorable now, I guess, from Season 3 onwards. But, I mean, it was, even though Capcom was always intended to add stuff, like, on, but it just left a real sour taste in your mouth, just the way how the game was kind of initially. I mean, you had to put up with months of, like, a mediocre package. But, yeah, I mean, fast forward to a few years later, and yeah, and Street Fighter 5 is in a better place now. That's why I'm thinking Street Fighter 6... Street Fighter 6 actually doesn't necessarily have to change that much. It just has to make sure that it's a good product in the first place. I think Strive struck a good balance in simplification and depth. However, developers need to understand that this isn't the main way to increase customer base. Characters and coolness are. To an extent, yeah. I would say that, but I'm thinking of it. I personally think a game like Killer Instinct has really cool characters too, and that game did decently, although I personally feel the game probably didn't do as well as it probably should have. And I'm not sure if I'd say Tekken does well because of the cool characters. Like, something like Tekken probably at this point does well because of legacy and the fact that a lot of legacy players hype the shit out of that game. And people like getting behind games that have a lot of hype behind them, so. But... Or I guess you're talking about like either Anime Fighters or Arc Sys game. Cool characters definitely help, but the mechanics though have to be. I'm not sure if beginner friendly is the right word, but they need to be accessible in the terms of like being accessible to players while still also having depth to hold on to them. Like, I really hate to usually go in this direction, but that's something I find that shooters or hero shooters tend to do well. They're good at kind of like having accessible mechanics, but also having a lot of depth. And that's part of the reason why people, I guess, play them and stick with them. Even though I know there's other factors at play, but you kind of get the idea. Sorry, Street Fighter needs like a Tekken 7 or a Smash Bros. Like offering. What do you mean by that? Do you mean in terms of content? Because I honestly think Tekken 7 did not have that much content when it released. Compared to Tekken Tag 2, Tekken 7 I thought was actually a bit lacking in content. Like, its story mode is pretty awful. The kind of single match arcade mode thingies for the characters that are not in the story mode, which is a lot of characters, is not really that good. The treasure battle is honestly really tedious, and it's kind of an excuse to just unlock stuff. And because I'm trying to remember if Tekken 7 had an arcade mode. It might have, but I don't remember as well. I remember in Tekken 7, yeah, if you wanted to unlock stuff, you had to do the treasure battle mostly. Where Tekken Tag 2 definitely, I know, had an arcade mode for every single one of the 59 characters, but... And in terms of like content offering, yes, Smash Bros. Ultimate is basically the epitome of, in terms of just offered overall content. I mean, it's a really fully featured package in terms of having what? It started with, I think, like 80-ish characters with like 100-ish stages, and that was before adding DLC characters. That is one thing I give Smash Bros. A lot of credit, is that the overall package, like when you just look at the game and just take a look at everything, it's basically what a modern fighting game should be in terms of package. A fighting game doesn't have to have 80 or characters or 100 stages, but you need to have that feeling of fullness, though. Like, as soon as you pop in Smash Bros. Ultimate and just mess around or play around, you get that feeling of a full game. There's a lot of games out there, definitely post Street Fighter V, that have that feeling of not being a complete game. Hell, I might even throw a game like Soul Calibur 4 on blast for honestly feeling very lacking in terms of offline content. It did have a good character creator, but it really just had a short story mode that was like 5 matches. And you had a Tower of Souls mode, I think it was, which was kind of a real, quite frankly, was BS. I mean, it was a very awkward challenge, and I didn't think it was nearly as good as like Soul Calibur 2's Weapon Master mode. With regards to Soul Calibur 6, I actually did really enjoy the Libra of Souls mode in comparison. I tried DOA 5 and 6, and what I don't like is the animations. It's like there is no difference between hidden, whiffing, and blocking because of the lack of hit freeze and hit effects. I actually do agree with you with DOA, and that's one thing I noticed with Soul Calibur and Tekken is that on one hand it looks like a light show with all the hit effects and everything, but one thing I do give those games credit, it's usually very clear whether you hit someone or whether something is blocked. In DOA though, you have to really pay attention to like the sound effects or I guess the actual visual action of hitting your opponent. So I guess I might ask like a little thought for any DOA fans. What would you think about DOA having more hit effects? Because I feel that when you watch a Tekken match, it's usually very clear when something is blocked or when someone gets hit by something. Like you have a large visual effect coupled with a large sound effect. Or I admit that DOA doesn't do that as much though. Yeah. And also with regards to the whiffing, it's tough to whiff punish stuff in DOA due to a lot of moves having somewhat quick recoveries, and the moves you would use as whiff punishers are not necessarily like the fastest stuff. Whereas like in Tekken, you usually just try and whiff punish was like a 15 frame combo starter, for instance. Never mind, don't mind that last comment. So a new game like an improved Capcom fight and evolution. I haven't played a lot of Capcom games besides Devil May Cry, but I saw Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and when I compare them, I think they made a steep back on the roster, not roster, and didn't do a lot to upgrade. I'm trying to figure out what did Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite upgrade over Marvel vs. Capcom 3. They tried to improve the graphics, but it went into kind of KOF 14 level of basically what I'm going to call right here like eye rape. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, even though it's a massive light show that I don't understand, it's still fun to watch. Or Infinite, though, is just an abomination. With regards to Capcom, I think they'll be okay though. I mean, yeah, they pretty much have to kind of rebrand or reboot the Marvel vs. Capcom series if they're able to do that, or their Versus series in general. But I think as Street Fighter 6 though, I mean, like if they just kind of continue what they're doing now and have proper rollback, not the Capcom's brand of rollback, which is garbage rollback, I think they'll be okay though. They'll be fine. All right, now moving on. Don't even know if I even really need to mention Injustice or Mortal Kombat though, since Injustice is very casual focused, so it's kind of whatever though. Mortal Kombat 11 though, I mean technically, I say the game is a bit of an improvement over the first one. Like they smoothed out the animations, they made them look better in Mortal Kombat 11, even though it's the non-gameplay stuff, namely they had a massive grind in order to unlock stuff, which was unfavorable. Other than that, I don't even think Mortal Kombat really has to do that more. Just keep touching up those AAA production values, and that's it. As for me, I wouldn't mind if Microsoft could give another chance at a Killer Instinct game, since I think they stopped releasing content for Killer Instinct back in 2016 or 2017. So it's been a long time, and it's just Killer Instinct is just a nice kind of. It's a nice change of pace in terms of it's a Western fighting game that doesn't feel like an NRS game. Like NRS games have this very specific brand of stiffness to them, which is a bit of an acquired taste. Where Killer Instinct is weird, where it's a Western fighter that kind of feels like its own thing in a way. So if we can maybe, I wouldn't mind like another kind of like Killer Instinct game though. And I feel like Killer Instinct probably doesn't even necessarily have to change that much. It just needs to maybe just keep improving the production values, since I'd say Killer Instinct's not that far from AAA production values. So yeah. Oh yeah, but now, what type of games did I forgot now? Oh, I might as well make a mention of this one. What do you think of the disposition of the Under Night in Birth games? French Bread's French Bread's fighting games. Although I think I heard about a new Melty Blood though. Just checking, is everyone okay? Are people speaking in the chat? Because I think the chat might have froze for me. Let me do a little check or something. I just want to let you know if anyone has any more comments on anything. Ah, there we go. I didn't know if the chat had frozen. Not played enough of Under Night to have a solid opinion on it. It looks cool though. Under Night's kind of an interesting game though, and the fact is that it's a game that kind of probably wears its nicheness on its sleeve. What I mean by that is everything about the game kind of makes it feel like I don't know. I wouldn't quite say indie like Skullgirls, but it just feels like super niche. Like it feels more niche than like an ArcSys game or something like that. One concern I might have a bit with Under Night is, even though it's its own thing and everything, I think that French Bread might have to consider moving on past like sprites though. Whereas ArcSys has this really gorgeous 2.5D visual style that they started with Guilty Gear Xrd, and then they used it with Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and Strive, and it looks gorgeous. Whereas BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle still use sprites, even though the actual new sprites, like the sprites of the Ruby characters and content, honestly look great. But I'm not sure if French Bread can really get away with continuing to use sprites unless they're fine with being like super niche for like all eternity. The new Melty Blood looks cool. I do need to check it out, but I know it's been like ages since the previous Melty Blood. But yeah, this also kind of like also brings up the question right here. What are your thoughts on the equivalent of a AAA release being based around sprites? And I'm not talking about Guilty Gear Strive's visuals. I mean, like, well, sprites. Basically, like what Uniclear uses, what like BlazBlue games like Central Fiction and to an extent BB Tag uses. Well, KOF before KOF 14. Like I don't know what other games still use sprites now. I think everything else has kind of moved to 3D graphics to an extent. But just maintaining my opinion though that it's. I think with the Generation 9 though, I mean, unless your game is going to be like a kind of like a $15 kind of like indie game, I do think that you would have to, the minimum type of graphics you can really kind of get away with would be like 2.5D, like basically like 2.5D cell shaded graphics. So like anything below, let's say Guilty Gear Strive's graphics, I'd say would be considered below standard at this point. I prefer shell-shaded 3D over sprites. Yes, for sure. I mean, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and Guilty Gear Strive in particular both look gorgeous. I actually would say straight up though that sprites would not do Grand Blue Fantasy Versus visual style justice. But then there's also the question of, now, what do you think of cell-shaded graphics over 3D graphics? Like, what would you think of like an anime fighter or something that had like Soul Calibur 6's visual aesthetic, for instance. Since Soul Calibur is like a 3D anime. Or hell, even Dead or Alive 6's aesthetic. Since Dead or Alive 6 also... Dead or Alive 6's character models are at least somewhat anime... like anime, I guess. Both are fine. We need diversity. Yeah, I agree with that right now. So, yeah, I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind it though. But like, one thing that we need though is that we need at least one genuinely solid and favorable, just AAA fighting game. Because as for fighting games with like AAA production values, it's really just Mortal Kombat 11. Like, Soul Calibur 6 and Dead or Alive 6 have the visual appeal of a AAA game, but they don't have the overall package or production values of a AAA game. Like, I personally think that Dead or Alive 6 or Soul Calibur 6 is kind of like the minimum in terms of what should be the standard for 3D fighter graphics in like the modern generation. Hey, Ryan Bomber, thanks for joining the stream, man. Just having a bit of chat now about the disposition of different types of fighting games. We've mentioned like various 2D fighters and of course the 4 main 3D fighters. I also might as well ask you, and I might as well ask the stream again, I might have mentioned it earlier, but what are people's thoughts on another Bloody Roar? A Bloody Roar in the 2020s. What do you mean by AAA is about having realistic graphics? AAA has to do with overall production values. Like with regards to Mortal Kombat 11, its graphics, production value, story, overall package, it's a AAA game. Killer Instinct Definitive Edition, I'm not sure if it had a big budget at first, but Killer Instinct, especially the Definitive Edition now, it feels like a AAA game. It has AAA quality visuals, pretty good stage design. It has a fully featured package. It feels AAA. A new Bloody Roar would be great. Whereas I feel that a lot of fighting games, like I'm gonna say bluntly, that Dead or Alive 6, Soul Calibur 6, Tekken 7, and Virtua Fighter 5 don't feel AAA though. Like again, like Dead or Alive 6 and Soul Calibur 6 have AAA level visuals, but the overall production value and package and story mode and whatever is not there. And about doing more AAA level presentation would be good, like more polished and story mode. Exactly, yes. AAA means like the overall package. Because you notice that when I say a AAA game, like, I don't know, like an Uncharted, a Last of Us, a Halo, like a Gears of War... Hell, even something like Sea of Thieves or like a Forza Motorsport, like you kind of get the idea. Or when I say, or like I don't know, like Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto, even Gran Turismo. Like when I say AAA game, you kind of like get the idea though, because you can tell when you're playing like a AAA game and when you're not playing a AAA game, if that makes any sense. Where I find that a lot of fighting games don't really give off that a AAA vibe. If that makes any sense. Like it's just the overall package. The overall package feels like it might be like slightly missing something. Basically, with a AAA game, you get that kind of fully like $80 Canadian, $60 American feel. Mortal Kombat is really the only AAA fighting game. Tekken, Street Fighter, and Dragon Ball Fighter are mainstream, but aren't as good as for people who don't. That is correct. Tekken 7 has sold over 7 million units, but because Tekken Tag 2 didn't do well, Tekken 7 had a AA budget. So I don't really care how much Tekken 7 has sold. The game is not AAA in any way. The graphics were an attempt, I guess, towards kind of AAA-ish graphics, but it's just... I mean, for the overall... I mean, it wasn't... like the modern 3D fighters feel like an attempt towards like AAA design, I guess production value, but it's just the overall package is just simply not AAA. Where Mortal Kombat 11 is probably the closest you get to a AAA game. If Killer Instinct was based off how it was with the Definitive Edition, which released in 2016, Killer Instinct I'd say is pretty AAA also. But yeah, Tekken isn't. Street Fighter V is not AAA. Where, like I said, Tekken, Street Fighter, and Dragon Ball FighterZ are all mainstream, but that's one thing that shouldn't be confused, which you implied. They're not AAA games. They're not. It's just not AAA. A lot of people, of course, favor and sometimes only pay attention to AAA games. Like, once had a friend say a fighting game at 12... 12... Oh, is BR, is that the Brazil Real? That's your currency, right? Was expensive for what it was, but he was happy buying FIFA of the year by 260 BRs. Brazil Reals. Yeah, and I admit that kind of attitude, though, is another thing that kind of hurts the fighting game, though. I'm actually going to have a small anecdote right now. Back in 2018, in like October, I was trying to get a friend, or at the time a co-worker, to want to get Soul Calibur 6 over just playing Fortnite. Do you know what he mentioned to me? He said $80 is a lot of money for a game that only takes up 11 gigabytes. On one hand, you say, though, it's not about the size, like how you use it. Like, Dragon Ball FighterZ is only 7.7 gigabytes or something. Like, on one hand, it's like, it's not the size, it's how you use it. Like, Tekken 7 uses up 53... I think, last I checked, Tekken 7 took up 53.1 gigabytes, but of course, I don't think that Tekken 7's overall offerings are any better than Dragon Ball FighterZ. And not to mention, Tekken 7 can be, like, horribly unoptimized in terms of visuals, but... It does kind of, like, bring to the notion, though, like, it's just... If you're paying $80 for a game and it only takes up 11 gigabytes, though, you can't help but feel that the game has been shafted on something. Why? I mean, why does it like take up so little memory? In the case of Soul Calibur 6, that's because the game doesn't really have many like cutscenes or anything like that. The stages are not necessarily the biggest either compared to like DOA or something like that. Like, I mean, when you go through the story modes in Soul Calibur, it's mostly kind of like text and like still images mostly. But yeah, but still the idea though that like paying like $80 Canadian for a game that takes up 11 gigabytes. So I mean, I could see how someone might be like hesitant about that. I mean, when you look at how much like the digital version takes up, I know now Soul Calibur 6 takes up like almost 20 gigabytes after all the updates and all that. But it's like you kind of get the idea though. I mean, like right now you're expecting like an $80 game to take up at least minimum like 30 to 40 plus gigabytes of space. I personally love DOA and even Injustice 2 aesthetics, but if some devs do something else, I am fine. Well, Injustice 2 has that NRS aesthetic, and honestly, that kind of dark aesthetic that I find that it suits DC games, especially I guess like a Mortal Kombat or Superman that have gone a bit darker in the last like 15-ish plus years or so. I mean, ever since like the Batman Begins Dark Knight, like these kind of superhero type IP's been going in a more of a darker direction. So I find that the NRS aesthetic, suits Injustice 2. DOA's aesthetic suits DOA, although I wouldn't really necessarily change DOA's aesthetic, even though I felt that DOA was more favorable when it was very bright and colorful, like with DOA 4, compared to where Dead or Alive 5 and Dead or Alive 6 were... Well, Dead or Alive 5 in particular was kind of... it had a lot of browns and grays, to say the least. It had that kind of Gears of War like aesthetic, if you get what I'm saying. Like basically like lots of browns. Dead or Alive 6 is a little bit more colorful, but it's still not as colorful as like DOA 4 was. I blame on what you're saying now. 120. So the problem is Japanese fighting game developers being able to give us the complete package, but still treat fighters like it's the arcade days. Kind of. I definitely feel that, and probably wouldn't be too off to say that the downfall of the arcade scene in places outside of Japan, and it might even be going down possibly a bit in Japan also, it has really hurt fighting games though. Like even a game like Tekken 7, you can tell was designed based on like arcade principles. Like Samurai Showdown also feels like it was designed based on like mid-2000 design principles. I mean, like, I guess that it's just, I mean, you can kind of see the difference where Mortal Kombat doesn't feel like it's designed based on a kind of arcade mentality, but I'd just like to see at least one more proper fighting game that goes for that basically goes for 3D fighter. I mean, not 3D. I mean, that goes for AAA style on production values right now. And there is games like COD taking over. I know what you mean though. Like Call of Duty, was it Warzone or Black Ops Cold War? Jeez, how many freaking subtitles is that? Yeah, those games take up like a whopping amount of like gigabytes. So like well over 150 gigabytes. Like, yeah, like you said, like almost 200 gigabytes. Which, if you know how much memory like a PS5 or Xbox Series X comes with, I mean, that's a huge chunk of your hard drive. I mean, like, you get less than a gigabyte to work with in a game. Taking up 200 gigabytes is a lot, but still though. I mean, and a fully priced game taking up only like less than 10 gigabytes though. That's like, it just feels kind of iffy though. I mean, like, it just immediately gives you that kind of AA or indie-ish feel. Really? Meanwhile, I have problems managing the space on my console. I have a problem with Tekken 7 and DOA 6 being 68 with nothing in it. It depends what you mean though, because technically the reason why Soul Calibur 6 takes up a lot less memory than Dead Eye 6 and Tekken 7 is because Soul Calibur 6 has very few cutscenes, but as a result though, it has a very bland presentation style. The actual matches look cool, which of course is important, but anything to do with story mode is it's basically the most simplistic, bland presentation that Project Soul could have like come up with. Even though Soul Calibur's always just relied on text for its story modes and stuff like that. Basically, Dead or Alive 6 and Tekken 7 have a lot more cutscenes. Is a big reason why they take up a lot more memory. So I wouldn't really necessarily say the games have nothing in them. Although I get what you mean though. That, I mean, yeah, they don't feel like they should be taking up 60 gigabytes either. Like, they should probably be like 30 gigabytes max compared to games. But although I guess don't get caught in a fallacy though that just because a game takes up more memory doesn't mean it's like bigger. Like Persona 5, not Royal, but Persona 5 takes like well over like 100, between 100 like 200 hours to complete. And that game took up like 20 something gigabytes or something like that. Games being tested through arcades is good because it meant they were more polished and console, but it also gave Japan the advantage of having played it longer. That is correct. I'm going to go back to Tekken 7 because, of course, that's one of the more recent releases of having an arcade release than getting a console release. Like, the game gets tested and balanced a lot better. However, by the time the game releases on console, it looks dated as all hell. Hell, I just recently tried the game Killer Instinct 2, which was Killer Instinct Gold on the N64. I mean, yeah, I got an arcade release, but by the time it ended up releasing on console, it was a really, really ugly looking port. And I honestly don't like looking at ugly ports. Now that we are the beta testers, games are so empty at launch. Well, I'm gonna have to throw some shade at Street Fighter V because I mean it kind of felt like it kind of started a trend of trying to go all esports, and basically what happens is that you focus entirely on the esports crowd and take the casual crowd for granted, basically, and then again, like you're right. What you end up having is the game empty at launch, and then they add stuff. That is not as bad for like a free to play type game. Again, like a Killer Instinct or like a Apex Legends type deal where they add stuff. Because you're literally getting what you pay for. You don't pay anything for the entry, so you don't get as much content. You would have to pay for the rest of the package. But the issue I kind of had with Street Fighter V is that it cost a full 70 Canadian dollars, but it had the content of a free-to-play game. It's definitely Street Fighter V's fault. And what happens with the fighting game community, or not the fighting game community, the fighting game development community, it follows Street Fighter's lead. After Street Fighter 4 was a successful, what happened? There was another boon of more fighting games. And then after Street Fighter V release, then we had more fighting games kind of follow in the lead of kind of, well, dumbing things down. I can even say straight up that a lot of choices or decisions in DOA 6 definitely felt influenced by Street Fighter V. Such as having like an incomplete package at launch, toning down and arguably dumbing down some design stuff. So I mean, like, it's unfortunate, and I honestly don't really see it changing in the future. Ubisoft outside of fighting games follow or still do. Yeah, but that's Ubisoft though. I honestly haven't liked Ubisoft since like the PS2 days with like Prince of Persia and like Beyond Good and Evil. I mean, like pre-Assassin's Creed, basically pre-Assassin's Creed Ubisoft. And of course the big ones like EA and Activision, whatever, yada yada, do that stuff also. But with regards to fighting games, both 2D and 3D, basically, what direction do you see them going in the future? And what direction would you like to see them going? I'll throw in my 2 cents first. An attempt at a new Bloody Roar. Although I'm pretty certain it probably wouldn't get AAA production values though. I'd like to see what Riot would do with their fighting game because, as people know, League of Legends has a huge following. League of Legends may very well be like the biggest fighting game there is. Biggest game there is. I know it's a MOBA, but so I'm kind of curious to see what Riot would do with the fighting game, because I can guarantee if the Riot fighting game Project L doesn't do well, then you're pretty much never going to see a Western developer try a new fighting game at all again. It's going to be just Mortal Kombat, Injustice, and if we're lucky, more Killer Instinct. They're going to keep getting simpler. There will be more games with playable online. Okay. In the future, though, I'm not sure about like Western developers giving fighting games a chance, though, because I know that there's some indie 2D fighters like Skullgirls, Fantasy Strike, Power Rangers, Battle for the Grid. I mean, like stuff like that, and they all have rollback netcode. But those again are all like kind of like cheaper indie games, stuff like that. But would you ever get something that's at a basically, I guess, at least in between like AA and AAA production values, which is basically like what 3D fighters are? I personally would not mind if more full-price ones had a free-to-play mode, finding a good spot into making simple stuff without alienating legacy base. Free-to-play is a good way to go. I mean, like, I admit that I wish that DOA had better marketing, because again, DOA is free-to-play. I mean, there's no excuse why you shouldn't have more people trying your game. But there's one game I actually really wanted to fare better. Does anyone remember this game right here? This is Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. This game is a pretty intriguing one, and one that I wouldn't mind if a fighting game developer or any developer gets a chance at a fighting game akin to that. What was special about Final Fantasy NT was, alright, the games technically still had AA production values, but its graphics were good, and it was a 3-on-3 fighting game. So what that means is that you could team up with 2 friends, and you can fight people online. I noticed that it creates a better vibe than a fighting game where it's just one-on-one, and then you either make friends with your opponent or you hate their guts. With NT, if you have like a couple other people to play with, then you get that kind of team feeling that like a MOBA or like a team-based shooter or a hero shooter would get. Although, of course, there is one primary thing that pretty much probably would keep Dissidia NT from ever having a chance of being really successful. It had garbage delay-based netcode. If Dissidia NT had rollback netcode, I would probably definitely give that game a chance and try and learn it. Because it's basically a 3-on-3 fighting game, which is actually not a horrible idea. But I do admit, though, that Square Enix and Team Ninja made some bad choices with that game, such as locking the story mode behind some sort of currency that forces you to have to play other modes. Terrible idea. Square Enix, never do it again. You too, Team Ninja. But, I mean, so disappointed when NT, though, made a lot of mistakes, though. Because the whole idea around it playing, it was basically an arena fighter with quite a lot of depth behind it. I mean, it's a hard as hell game to play. I mean, it was not a shallow game in any way. Also, how do you like Tekken 8 is going to... Andre Bukadu, thank you for joining the stream. How do you like Tekken 8 is going to turn out? There's two choices. Namco Bandai's either going to get creative and try and do something different, or it's going to be more like Tekken 7. Tekken 7 has sold over 7 million copies, so Namco has no reason to do anything different. Hell, they can just ride on Tekken 7 for a bit now. However, Season 4 for Tekken 7 ended, back in March. So, I'm pretty certain there's going to be a Tekken 8 this generation, and it will probably be very similar, though. I mean, the only question, though, is that they're probably going to try and dumb things down even more. I mean, I honestly think every fighting game this Generation 9 is going to get toned down or dumbed down in some way, though. I mean, that's just the direction, though. I'm actually almost curious to what if Sega does actually bother to ever come up with a Virtua Fighter 6. Would they dumb down Virtua Fighter and add in meter-based techniques? Even something like Tekken's Rage. And also, thank you, Andre, for the compliment on my content. Thank you. Crossplay and Rollback. Yes! Oh, yes! Fighting games need crossplay. They need it. A game like Overwatch, which has a crap ton of players on any platform, has crossplay between PS4, Xbox One, and Steam, and that technically PS5 and Xbox Series X also because of backwards compatibility. A fighting game without crossplay is it's just why? I mean, Samurai Showdown doesn't have crossplay in it, and as a result, the online population suffers. The overall community suffers a bit because of that. Yeah, more games having a free-to-play option would be godlike. It would make trying out the games much easier and get more people. That's fine, though. I mean, think of a free-to-play game like a glorified demo in the good way. So, I mean, that's actually kind of the idea. But remember that a free-to-play game is to get you playing the game so that under the kind of notion that the more you play the game, the more that you'll spend money in the game. No one spends over a month or 2 months on a game without buying something. I mean, you see that character you like, you see that costume you like, you see that skin that you like, or you see that accessory you like. I mean, if you play any free-to-play game for a month, you will spend money on at least something. Unfortunately, I remember that game. Oh, it's a fun one. NT failing again. It's just frustrating because I'm thinking that this is actually what fighting games need more of. A kind of team-based feel. Being able to play with your teammates and kind of combining techniques and strategies and tactical stuff together is... I mean, it was great. It's just that NT just felt like a piece of piss online. So it's with all the other with the horrible market and all the other things that held the game back, NT had no chance of success in the West. I think Tekken 8 should pull a Guilty Gear Strive with the roster and gameplay. I think Tekken has gotten to this weird spot where it's always going to have minimum 35 plus characters. Tekken 7 left out a lot of characters from Tekken Tag 2. People are going to complain, where's Lei? Where's Anna? Where's Julia? Where's all these other characters I didn't really play and they were unpopular, so that's why they were left out characters? Skim the roster down to 30 and rework the gameplay a bit. Personally, I would like that. I personally do not like it when fighting games exceed 30 characters, or more specifically, when they exceed 35 to 40 characters. That is too much. Tekken 7 has too many characters. I'm not going to learn 51 matchups. Smash Bros, as epic as it is, technically has too many characters. I'm not going to learn 80 matchups. Although although it does give that vibe of it does give that vibe of having the kind of epicness, having a lot of characters. But I do think a competitive game should try and cap itself at 30 characters. Although in the case of Dead or Alive 5, it started with 24 and then it added up all the way to 36 by the end. But you kind of get the idea, though. And I honestly never get tired of ogling Cassandra. Sorry. Yeah. The question everybody has to ask themselves is, do they really want to see their favorite game in today's modern design philosophies? At this point, it's kind of like you have, aside from Virtual Fighter, you have no choice. I mean, Dead or Alive 6 happened. Tekken 7 is actually considerably dumbed down from Tekken Tag 2, because of course Tekken Tag 2 got criticized for being too hard, but Tekken 7's in this weird spot where it's toned down, but it's still a good balance between being highly technical, but also I guess being a bit more accessible. Even though I still think Tekken 7 would still be hard for beginners to the fighting game genre. But with today's modern philosophies, yeah, I mean, I don't really think I would say it really did Dead or Alive 6 much justice. Even though I still think Dead or Alive 6 is still pretty solid though. Like some stuff I would tweak. Although the thing that begs the question, whoever said that Dead or Alive 5 was too hard? I mean, who said that? Even though I do admit that it might be a case that I don't know if people would actually overtly ever admit that they find DOA challenging, but I don't remember anyone ever really saying that though. But the reason I guess why I'm bringing it up is that Dead or Alive always has had the stigma and impression that it's a shallow game, which anyone who has actually learned how to play the game knows that that's complete bullshit. But I mean, like you kind of gotta get the idea though. Crossplay should be standard. I am not ready to see I'm not ready to see BB Strive. You already got BB Strive. It's called BB Tag. That's just take. That is true. 51 is way too much. More people can get in easier. Multiplayer team-based games could be interesting since many people from what I heard get intimidated by 1-1. It's just the fact that it's really hard to motivate someone to play a 1 versus 1 fighting game. Delay-based netcode just makes things worse. It's bad enough that it's hard enough to go online and get your ass kicked. But to get your ass kicked in a match where nothing makes any sense, you can't react to anything, and as a result you don't really learn anything, like that's not fun for most people. DOA is very easy to get into. It's got depth. DOA is a good balance between both. Oof. Alright, just a heads up now that it's 11 p.m. EDT here, so yeah, it's been a couple of hours, so I will be winding down, obviously very soon, tone it down. But yeah, DOA has a great balance between being easy into and got depth. Hell, Soul Calibur 6 I think has a good balance between getting into and a depth. Even though Soul Calibur has a lot of unique systems and all that kind of stuff, Soul Calibur actually isn't hard to play. The hard thing is just both understanding the systems and then playing to the meta. But actually playing Soul Calibur DOA is not that hard. Where Virtual Fighter 5 and Tekken 7 are a lot harder to get into than DOA or Soul Calibur, for instance. However, once you get down your movement in Tekken and have good fundamentals, then it's just getting down your fundamentals and playing to the meta. The worst thing DOA has is his network connect. Sup, Wisher Fox? Thanks for joining. The worst thing DOA has is its network connect? Well, DOA does have a Wi-Fi indicator, which is actually pretty awesome. It should be in every game, but I don't think that DOA's netcode is any worse than honestly any other 3D fighter. I find Soul Calibur just as difficult to play and lag as DOA. Virtual Fighter is weird in the sense that Virtual Fighter is either really good or really awful. And Tekken, I guess, is kind of the best by default. Even though Tekken just feels like it has like Capcom rollback now. It's just some sort of weird rollback. I'm trying to play all my moves on the third frame, but it's hard to do. I can't handle it. I can't handle playing a 3. Any chance you'll cover Melty Blood Lumina out of curiosity? That is a huge maybe, although I haven't really covered anime fighters that much because it's not a genre that I'm extremely familiar with. And hell, I even want to learn Guilty Gear now, even though I'm currently learning Killer Instinct. But I'll take a look though. I mean, I definitely would give it a shot, and if there's enough interest, I'd consider looking at Melty Blood if people are interested. DOA is the most frustrating in lag because of the triangles. And if you're late on a throw punish because lag and they press anything, that is correct. That is actually partially the reason why Tekken is All right, I'm gonna be say loose. Why Tekken is more fun to play in lag, because Tekken has an auto block system where if you either do nothing or press back, you'll block all high and mid, so it's easier to like kind of guard it, and you don't have to worry about stuff like high counter strikes or anything like that. Or so with DOA, if you can't react to things, the game's unplayable. And that's why I'm thinking DOA would actually be really fun online with rollback, and I think more people would appreciate it if they actually realized it wasn't just mashy nonsense. It's not just mashy nonsense. Where DOA is actually a proper fighting game when it's not in lag. But anyways, yeah, I'm probably gonna be winding down. VF is less frustrating to learn because strike punishes. Kind of, yeah. Both Virtual Fighter and Tekken are better. Are both better in lag because of just because of just the way how the games are though. So they're not as reactionary. It's hard to whiff punish stuff in those games in lag, but in DOA you gotta react to everything though. Anyways, though, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in for this brief chat. So check out next week. I probably might consider doing another one on Saturday night, probably at 9 p.m. Well, 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or EDT. So thanks to everyone that joined in and contributed to the chat. And I'll stay in the chat for a little more if you have any more questions. But this is Force Nature sign off. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.